So Gibson is at it again, but you will never guess what they're really up to and how there is so much beneath the surface behind this seemingly innocuous move. That's what we're going to talk about. So, hi everyone, welcome back to the Ministry of Guitar. My name is Utkarsh Mohan. I'm coming to you from Singapore. As always, if you like what I'm doing, please do like, subscribe, and share. It really helps. Now, this was supposed to be an Ask Me Anything, episode number 3, and that one will be coming next week. But I did have to interrupt usual programming to bring this because yesterday Gibson launched a new program. Not a new program, this is the second version of this program, which a lot of us may have seen maybe on Instagram, maybe anywhere else. Looked at it, maybe had an opinion, and moved on. It's just one of those other pieces of news. And it could be, but what I want to do is I want to tell you what I see when I see this move. In fact, I had seen it when I'd seen it the first time when I did this. And let me tell you what I see below the surface based on my experience, of course, as a senior executive in business and as a marketer. So what I'm talking about is Gibson's, looking at it now, certified vintage program, where you get one-of-a-kind, golden era blue chip guitars. I love the words. Celebrity-owned guitars, models directly from the Gibson vault. And this time round, they have a bunch of them. I think they have a few acoustic guitars. They have a ES330, a SG Les Paul from 1960, a 57 Les Paul Special. Now, the guitars themselves aren't important. So to begin this, I want to take you away from the world of guitars for a second. Starry, Starry Night, Vincent van Gogh. Now, think about Vincent van Gogh. He died a penniless artist, literally, in an asylum. His paintings are worth millions, yet he does not see a piece of that action. He's long dead. That is the difference between, say, the individuals whose legacies become iconic and the brands that become iconic. Gibson's guitars became iconic, the guitars built in the 1950s and 60s, and Gibson, the property, Gibson, the company, is still alive and well to enjoy the legacy, to potentially cash in on the legacy of their products. There is a direct impact of it, which is, of course, all the hype, all the positive brand equity that Gibson has today. But then Gibson decided that they want to get in on the action more directly. And that is probably the origins of the certified vintage program. It's very similar to what watchmakers have been doing, like Rolex, where they realize that the resale market for some of their watches is way higher than what some of the new watches go for. So why is it that other people get a piece of the action other than the progenitor themselves, which is the brand? Now, this part about the Gibson certified vintage program is fairly obvious. You don't need to have worked in marketing to have noticed this, right? That there is such a big market for vintage guitars, or such an expensive market, and the company itself is probably feeling a little left out and trying to get in on the action. This part is not too difficult to understand. But there is a second level and there's a third level effect happening here. Second level effect. There's a term that we use in the industry. It's called anchoring. And what happens is that pricing in the market, the price of something, it is very subjective. Yes, of course, you look at how much it costs to make something, etc., but really the pricing is often determined by market forces. And a trick, quite literally a trick you could say, or technique, the line between trick and technique is a very thin one. A technique used by companies is to put products in context of a much more expensive product to make it seem very affordable in context. In fact, what you typically see is if you go to a supermarket, you will have super cheap products, mid-level products, high products. The high-priced products make the mid-level products seem okay. A good example of this is super high-end luxury cars like, say, Rolls-Royce. It's very often that they are sold in yacht shows, where they're selling luxury yachts. A $500,000 car may sound crazy, but compared to a $3 million, $10 million, $15 million yacht, it's really pocket change. So anchoring is a very powerful tool that marketers, including myself in the past, have used. Now, what does this have to do with Gibson? The price of vintage Gibsons particularly now that Gibson is offering them themselves under the Gibson umbrella, under the certified vintage program. And they are offering prices that are, I would say, well further of what regular vintage guitars are going for, because they've been blessed by the overlords at Gibson. The prices of these vintage guitars are creating a very, very high comparison point where suddenly something like a Murphy Lab, even though it is now occupying prices that new Gibsons never used to, you are regularly seeing Murphy Labs at more than $10,000. Suddenly a Murphy Lab, which is like a vintage guitar, but isn't really, but that's the entire sell, right? If you can't afford a real vintage, get a Murphy Lab. It feels like the same thing. We can't tell the difference. 25,000 artists saying, yeah, it feels exactly like my vintage guitar. So what they're doing is they're anchoring the $10,000 Murphy Lab versus the $200,000 certified Gibson vintage. And suddenly the Murphy Lab looks like amazing value. Wow, the actual vintage thing is that expensive, but the Murphy Lab is only $10,000 versus $200,000 for the certified vintage. It's a very, very powerful effect, and it's not something that honestly I came up on myself, because a lot of people that I've talked to who actually like Murphy Labs, a lot of people that I've talked to who like vintage guitars, this is something that they have been saying, yeah, I mean, these vintage guitars are so expensive, but the Murphy Labs, they've aged it and they've done this and done that. So yes, it just feels like the same thing. That's why I get it. So the big thing that this entire certified vintage program is doing is it is creating a very, very comparable price point for a vintage guitar versus a Murphy Lab, and making the Murphy Lab and all the other Gibsons that go below this Murphy Lab thing very, very affordable in comparison. So this is indirectly affecting new guitar sales, because if you look at it, the absolute size of the certified vintage program is very small. They're selling 6 guitars now. They sold a few guitars earlier. Why is it worth a company's while to invest the time into setting up this program? There's a cost. In any big company, to do any sort of new program, there's a certain cost. So I can guarantee you that when they did this, they were probably also thinking about, okay, it'll take us probably a disproportionate amount of effort to source a few vintage guitars and certify them, but it'll have a payoff because it'll also help us by making our new guitars seem more affordable in comparison. And this brings me to the second thing that's going on. Halo. Halo is another marketing effect. Halo is when you do something, but it gives you a positive effect on something else. Now, certified vintage, exactly this purpose, where you have official, not reseller, not on the market, but official certified blue chip Gibson guitars selling for hundreds of thousands of dollars by the Gibson company. So this is a company that is selling guitars that are costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. Never mind that they're old guitars and they've just been kind of checked. So the same company is selling hundreds of guitar that costs $100,000. It's not very difficult to say that gives a certain, not that Gibson needs more of it, but it gives a certain ability for them to then have a pricing power on their lower guitars. Right? This is the company that's giving you a $200,000 or $100,000 guitar, certified blue chip vintage, or you can get an affordable version of it at Murphy Lab at $10,000. Or if you really are a plebeian and you don't have money, then you can get the $1,500, $2,000 Les Paul Studio. But when you're buying the $1,500, $2,000 Les Paul Studio, you're getting it from the same company that's also selling a $200,000. So you may not think of this directly, but part of Gibson's enduring legacy, despite the average quality of their products, which I've talked about many points in time, is this entire reframing of the value of the Gibson brand, the value of the Gibson guitar, purely the way the market values it. It's something that we say that pricing is often, when it comes to luxury brands, people buy it not in spite of the price, but because of the price. So for you, let's just taking the Yamaha Pacifica example that I talked about in last AMA, you could have for $2,000, you could have the Yamaha Pacifica Pro, or you could have a Gibson Les Paul Studio or whatever. These are not comparable guitars technically, but just bear with me for a second. I just want to illustrate a point. Yamaha Pacifica, what comes to your mind? The $300, $400 cheap guitar that you got as a student, that you maybe learned to play guitar on. That is the halo that you're getting from the Pacifica brand. It's not a very premium one. On the other hand, the halo that you're getting from the Gibson brand, especially now that you always had those vintage guitars selling, but now in the Gibson umbrella you have these $200,000 things. So one, you think, okay, this is already a more premium product. It's coming from the same company as that. Secondly, you harbor a hope, which a lot of us irrational guitarists do, that okay, maybe, who knows, my Gibson will probably retain its value. They do generally retain value better than other brands, and who knows, this is part of a this is the kind of product that people buy, and then it has even more demand later. This is like when people buy Rolexes, the Rolex, I think, what's it called, the silver colored one. I'm forgetting the name. I'll put the name over here. I'm not into watches, but my friend was telling me that if you want to buy it new from Rolex, you need to wait a while. On the resale market, they're more expensive. So this is a similar kind of effect. So the long and short of it is, the Gibson Certified Vintage program is much, much more than just selling 5 or 10 vintage guitars and trying to make a little bit of a good profit on each of them. It is a much, much broader program which aims to recontextualize the pricing of expensive Gibson guitars to make them seem like good value and give a positive spin-off on the entire range. Is this good or bad? I don't think it's bad. I mean, let's just put it this way. This is marketing, brand creation. This is what people do. So it is part and parcel of the entire art of storytelling. If you think about what car companies do, the entire reason that they do racing, win on Sunday, sell on Monday, is because you want to create that halo effect from racing to the car on the showroom. So it's not bad. I mean, it would be wrong to say that it's bad. But at the same time, I do think that it is important for people to be aware. And that is why I endeavor to make these videos, because I would like to open up the curtain behind the world of branding and marketing. What are the things, what are the techniques used by the best in the business, so that at least you're aware of it. This is not to open the curtain and show you the Wizard of Oz, this tiny man running some machines, but just for you to know that ultimately brands, and especially luxury brands, which is what Gibson is becoming, are often selling more on the power of story than product. And if you like the story, like for example, I like the story for certain things. I do have them. For me, a BMW just feels right. I know it was the ultimate driving machine 30 years ago, and the new BMWs aren't that, but it's just something I can't shake. So I understand it. Even it's like I know it, yet I do it. So I just want you to have that information as well, so that you can make the choices for yourself. All right, as always, I hope this was helpful. Till next time.